More now on our top story. Israeli airstrikes on Gaza continued overnight despite growing optimism that a peace deal could be reached soon. We've got some live pictures coming to us from the border, which shows there is smoke coming up from Gaza late on Saturday. Israel's prime minister said he hoped to announce the release of all remaining hostages in the coming days. And negotiators are converging on Cairo ahead of talks tomorrow aimed at ending nearly 2 years of war. Dr. James Smith, an emergency doctor who spent 2.5 months in Gaza last year and is now a lecturer in humanitarian studies at UCL, who is regularly in touch with medics in the territory, was asked for his impression of what's happening on the ground at the moment while there is this optimism towards a possible peace deal. He responded that, as was just reported and as is always the case, as negotiations get underway, Israel has intensified its violence throughout Gaza. He stated that we know that at least 70 Palestinians have been killed in the last 24 hours alone, most of them in Gaza City. The hospitals throughout Gaza are overwhelmed every single day by the continuous influx of injured and mortally wounded Palestinians from Israel's attacks. In the last week alone, Israel has continued to target healthcare worker colleagues, citing Nurse Marwan Abdin, who was shot by an Israeli drone inside NASA Hospital, MSF occupational therapist. Omar Hayek, who was killed while waiting for the bus to go to work, and Nurse Tasnim Al-Hams, who was kidnapped in Mossy. He concluded that the situation is as bad as it has been at the worst of the days over the course of the last 2 years. When asked how a potential Israeli withdrawal to an initial line would affect the distribution of aid and whether it would complicate or make it easier to get aid to the right places, Dr. Smith said the short answer is that it is impossible really to navigate the distribution of humanitarian aid while the Israeli military remains in Gaza and continues to occupy the Gaza Strip. He stated that, of course, the withdrawal of Israeli troops and a complete cessation of Israel's attacks from air, sea, and the ground is absolutely necessary, such that there can be an upsurge in the delivery of humanitarian aid. It was pointed out that one of the points the peace plan sets out is that distribution is supposed to be without interference and conducted through the UN and its agencies and the Red Crescent. And Dr. Smith was asked how critical he thinks it will be to have the Rafe crossing reopening for that. He said it is essential, explaining that Israel has maintained complete control over humanitarian access as a core pillar of its genocide, and that Israel can have no role in the coordination and distribution of humanitarian aid. He insisted it must be managed independently through well-established and trusted humanitarian organizations, which must be led by Palestinian humanitarian organizations and Palestinian civil society, which is best placed to respond to those needs. Added that what we need to really emphasize here is that the genocide needs to stop, and that is not something that can be subject to negotiation. He argued that many of the terms of this 20-point plan are simply legal and political responsibilities that are incumbent on all states in Israel as an occupying power. He said the USA is presenting itself as a broker of peace, which frankly is perhaps the most absurd label that one could ascribe to the U.S. state, given the violence and oppression that it has wrought worldwide, particularly in Palestine. Dr. Smith concluded that what we need to be focused on now is ending Israel's ongoing violence and orientating towards the serious questions of accountability and justice, and that it is deeply concerning that very few are talking about the conditions of occupation, apartheid, and slow genocide that Israel continues to impose on Palestine and the Palestinian people. He finished by asking what peace looks like if we don't address these underlying foundational issues. Dr. James Smith was then thanked for his time, and it was pointed out that Israel does deny that it's responsible for genocide in Gaza.